So in today's web dev tip, we're going to take a look at how you can replace certain special characters in a string with an escape sequence. And this process is known as encoding, and there's a few different functions that you can use for this. And you may need to do this process if you're sending some data to a URL via an AJAX request, for example, or you might be just working with some data within the browser and you have a need to replace these special certain characters with their equivalent escape sequence. So let's have a look at the string that we've got on the page at the moment. So there's a few different special characters in there. So certain characters such as the apostrophe, the comma, the hash, and also colon and brackets are all considered special characters, and we may or may not need to encode these depending on the actual use case that we've got. So as mentioned, you might need to do this if you're working with a URL, and what we can use to do this is a special function called Encode URI. So if I just wrap our string in a call to the Encode URI function, and just close the parentheses there. So you can see in the output on the right hand side that some of the characters have been replaced with an escape sequence, and it's only really the spaces that have been replaced in this string so far. And you can see here, instead of having a space here, we've got the %20 control escape sequence, and now what we've got, you'll find, is a continuous string without any spaces in. So that might be important if you are trying to send some data via a URL and the URL cannot have any spaces inside. So that's quite common, and you might see that in your browser from time to time when you're working with data that has spaces in. The other option we've got is to actually use the Encode URI component, and this function is a bit more for encoding the query parameters, the data that's at the end of the URL when you're sending data to a backend service, for example. And you can see if we use that function, we get a slightly different output. There are still some characters that haven't been encoded, but you can also see that the hash symbol here has been replaced, and also the comma has been replaced here, and further down we've also got the colon that's been replaced too. So by using the Encode URI component, you can make sure that you're encoding all the necessary characters that might cause trouble for a service should you be sending any data to it. But as mentioned, there are a few different characters that haven't been encoded, and you can do that manually. You can just use a find and replace to find these special characters and replace them with their own control codes. There is an old function which is still available in the browser, which is escape, and you'll see now what we get is all of the characters have been removed and replaced with their escape sequences. But this function has some side effects which I'm not sure what they are, but I know that it's not recommended to use the escape function anymore. So the recommended approach is to use the Encode URI or Encode URI component functions. And if you do have any other special characters that you have a need to encode, then you should just do those manually. But just so you're aware, the escape function is there, and you might see that in some old legacy code. So there you go, there's a few different ways of how to encode special characters within your strings. Make sure you stay tuned for more web dev tips.